New coaster will be located where the Turnpike is located, which will be cruising out of here for the time being. It's been here since 1966, a Kennywood tradition for generations. But plans are underway to bring the Turnpike back in the near future.
Are you sure about that?
I've spent a good deal of time on this channel discussing Kennywood and its many notable attractions, but for a small park like this that has to make creative use of their space, it's easy to realize that there are many attractions the park has planned over the years but never went through with. So let's take a look at what could have been in an alternate universe with 5 cancelled Kennywood attractions. Number 1. The Return Pike. Many people like myself probably grew up riding this classic antique car attraction. Situated right at the front of the park, this was the first ride that a lot of families would head toward to start their day. First opening in 1966, Turnpike was an important piece of Kennywood history as it was installed before the park officially owned the land that it sat on, making this a risky installation. The vehicles originally ran on gasoline, but they were eventually replaced with electric cars which remained for the rest of the ride's operation. The ride took guests on a relaxing drive through a wooded area, over and under a bridge, and through a gas station before coming to an end. Not the most thrilling ride in the world, but a perennial favorite to many. In 2009, Kennywood made the controversial decision to remove Turnpike at the end of the season and replace it with a new roller coaster. That coaster would become Skyrocket, a Premier Rides launch coaster, which has now been operating for 10 years, although not without some problems. Although Skyrocket tends to be a polarizing coaster, Kennywood assured the public in 2009 that it had plans to bring back the Turnpike in the future. The park's public relations manager at the time, Jeff Filico, reassured guests of this promise, stating that their current plan was to put the Turnpike underneath Skyrocket's supports. So that explains why Skyrocket's layout stays so high off the ground, but fast forward to the present day and nothing. For whatever reason, the park did not go forward with this plan to bring Turnpike back. No concrete reason has ever been given, though I would guess that there wasn't as much room under Skyrocket as park management had hoped there would be. Looking at the area from overhead, it does look like a roadway could be placed under certain parts of the coaster, but the length would be nowhere near the original layout. Kennywood continues to tease Turnpike's revival every now and then, with the most recent reference being a gravestone in the old mill reading, T. Pike, I'll be back. But whether we'll ever see it happen remains to be seen. Number 2. The Monorail. Does this footage look familiar to anyone? This is the monorail that used to be at Busch Gardens, Tampa until 1999. The monorail took guests over the Serengeti Plains section of the park, allowing for some great views of the many animals that lived there. In 1999, Busch Gardens closed the monorail in preparation for a major park expansion, and it was dismantled in the off-season. The station was saved, however, and it would eventually be reused for cheetah hunt. The monorail itself was sold to Kennywood in June 2000, but for what purpose? The park stated to several news outlets that the monorail would be used to shuttle guests from the multiple parking lots across the road to the park entrance. When the 2001 season began, though, the monorail was nowhere to be seen, and the park has not made any mention of it in the 2 decades since. It's unknown why the monorail was never installed at the park, but my speculation is that there may have been clearance issues with having a monorail track going over Kennywood Boulevard, which is a heavily traveled roadway. The monorail itself is said to still be in the park's possession, kept in storage off park property, seemingly for the indefinite future. Number 3. The on-site hotel and water park. In the early 2000s, the Pennsylvania Turnpike was in the middle of a massive expansion to the Monfayette Expressway, a toll road that was planned to connect Morgantown, West Virginia and Monroeville, Pennsylvania. The proposed layout would put an exit ramp in Duquesne, 5 minutes down the road from Kennywood. This news excited park management, as it would mean traffic to the park would be greatly increased. In preparation, the park purchased 50 acres of land for potential expansion in 2004. This land included the former Kmart shopping plaza adjacent to the parking lot, as well as the ravine behind Racer. The park hinted to many media outlets at its plans for this property, including an on-site hotel and indoor water park, as well as several infrastructure improvements. This hotel and water park were likely to be built on the former Kmart site, though it's unknown what the original intent for the ravine might have been. This might also have tied in with the monorail, as it could shuttle guests to and from the hotel. When the expressway construction was halted in the late 2000s due to lack of funding, Kennywood effectively abandoned its plans for the expansion, although by that point, the park had already been purchased by Palace Entertainment, so it's unclear if the new owners would have even been interested in such an expansion. To date, the land that the park purchased has been used mostly for storage. The Kmart lot was used to store Steel Curtain's track while the coaster was being built, and the Ravine houses a massive storage building that is mostly used to store props for the park's Halloween and Christmas events. We still haven't seen how a Kennywood attraction would utilize this property, however we did get incredibly close. Number 4. The RavineRMC. When Kennywood's Logjammer closed for good at the end of the 2017 season, it opened up the floodgates to a ton of speculation over what could replace it. We know now, of course, that Steel Curtain would come to be built on the site, but Steel Curtain was not the park's first choice. In fact, the park received a high number of bids from various manufacturers to build a coaster on the site, and one that seemed to get considerably far along in development was from none other than Rocky Mountain Construction. Now, I do want to mention that this layout was never officially confirmed to be from RMC, but the common belief is that they were behind this pitch. In late 2017, a design document was leaked from a city council meeting where officials from Kennywood were presenting the coaster layout, seeking to gain approval for construction. As the line between West Mifflin and Duquesne runs right through the bottom of the ravine behind Racer, approval from both townships would be needed to construct the coaster. The layout appears to show a relatively compact coaster, but with some incredibly tight turns and transitions that I honestly wouldn't see working out well without some sort of modifications. The coaster would also make use of the bottom of the ravine, as it was rumored to run through a mock train storage building, much like the real one in the same ravine that the park uses for storage. Strangely, the coaster appears as though it would have had a lift hill back up to the station, which is a rather anticlimactic way to end a coaster. It was revealed several months later that this layout was not intended to feature any inversions at all, which is out of character for RMC. Roller coaster forums went wild when these plans were leaked, and excitement was through the roof, so you can imagine the confusion that occurred when Steel Curtain was announced from S&S, and that it would not use the ravine at all. Unfortunately, the plans with RMC had fallen through, with the common belief being that approval was not granted from Duquesne Township, forcing the park to keep the coaster on the West Mifflin side of the township line. Additionally, it was revealed that the hillside leading into the ravine is extremely unstable, and preparing the ravine for coaster construction would be an exceedingly costly endeavor. Despite the cancellation, I think most coaster enthusiasts are satisfied with what we got instead. There might be a day in the future where we get an RMC at Kennywood, but until then, 9 inversions it is. Number 5. Steel Phantom's original replacement. This one is going to involve a lot of speculation. By this point, everyone knows the story. Steel Phantom, Kennywood's aerodynamics looping hypercoaster, was announced to be closing at the end of the 2000 season due to decreased ridership. The park brought in D.H. Morgan Manufacturing to renovate the coaster into Phantom's Revenge, and the rest is history. There's one tiny detail in there that often gets overlooked, however. At the time, park president Harry Henninger stated that Kennywood's desire to stay competitive in the amusement park industry contributed to their decision to close Steel Phantom, and the park was already looking into potential replacements. In the end, it was the immense backlash that the park received for closing Steel Phantom that led to their decision to renovate the coaster, keeping the iconic second drop. We know the end result, but what were these potential replacements? Nothing concrete has ever been released, but I have a good idea as to what the park may have been looking into. Remember, Harry Henninger said that the park's desire to stay competitive is partially what influenced them to close Steel Phantom. What coaster could have opened in 2000 that would have been so impressive that Kennywood felt the need to replace its largest coaster? Millennium Force. When the world's first Giga Coaster opened at Cedar Point in 2000, it shook up the coaster community and the amusement industry. Parks began realizing that the 300-foot mark could finally be reached, and manufacturers such as Intamin were willing to go the distance. I'm aware this is a bold claim, but I think Kennywood was looking into getting an Intamin Giga Coaster to replace Steel Phantom. The park already had a good working relationship with Intamin, having opened Pitfall only 3 years before, and Raging Rapids had been operating for 15 years at that point. Now, how creative would Intamin have gotten with the space available? We can't be too sure, but with the amount of speed a Giga provides, they would need to pack in as much track as possible. Of course, when the complaints started coming in about Steel Phantom closing, the park had to quickly make a decision, and they ended up bringing in D.H. Morgan instead. I know most everyone is more than happy with the result, but it's interesting to think about what was said behind the scenes about Steel Phantom's original replacement. So there you have it, 5 cancelled Kennywood attractions. It's interesting to think about how much different the park would be if these had all come to fruition, but hope isn't lost for all of them. The park has continued to tease Turnpike's return to this day, and with Palace Entertainment building a new headquarters on park property, we might just see some expansion into that ravine after all. I'd like to know your thoughts on these cancelled editions down in the comments, and whether or not you're glad that they were cancelled. Sometimes a cancellation is for the better after all, except that one. Anyway, that's going to do it from me. Thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for more coaster content coming soon on Rampaging Rex Productions.